Welcome to the Schmoopydady streaming experience. I'm your host, as per usual, Schmoopydady. If it's the first time you're watching the stream, the VOD of the video on YouTube. I'm a monthly Hearthstone Wild Legend player who typically hits Legend first of the month, and after that I goof off. And when I goof off, I play your decks. But first, tonight, I'm going to do one of my typical every 2-week meta check-ins, except instead of doing the usual check-in on what's going on with Ladder, we have a very exciting event happening this weekend. If you are watching this video, you are probably roughly 48 hours away from our second Wild Open, hosted by one Maxie 1234. Yes, that one, the famous one, who's very good at Standard, and the very, very present, very famous in the Wild community, kvlt. They co-stream a grassroots competition that is often supported by Blizzard to play on the North American server in a Wild Open like we used to have. So if you want to throw your hat into the ring and join a conquest style format, bring 4 decks. You ban one, your opponent bans one, and then you try to see if you can get the 3 decks that are remaining that have not been banned through to the next round, and that is how you win the money poggies. And there is money involved. There will be $100. 100 packs is what is stated right now. $100 and 100 packs. I'm not sure how they're distributed between the winners. And last time they did one on NA and on EU, it was supported by Blizzard with a couple of bundles. So there might be bundles this time. Who knows? Wouldn't shock me. So I want to kind of look at what a conquest format looks like right now in our Wild meta. And last time I talked about West versus East, which was some months ago, we kind of already touched on the highlights. The best deck in a conquest style, I get to choose my ban style format, I believe is still Hostage Mage. This is NHL Fan 1's list, updated. A little different than what I'd probably bring in play. I still like having a biscuit in the list. I still like running Rats and Theatar, but NHL has foregone the biscuit, foregone the Rats, but foregone the Theatar, and given us instead a list that is running 2 Knick-Knack Shacks. Now, the Knick-Knack Shacks don't look like it, but they are in and of themselves tech. If you are expecting to face a lot of questline demon hunters and you're expecting to get hit with glide often, Knick-Knack Shacks are perfect for that. Now, if you're expecting hostage mage mirrors, that's when I would probably also include at least Theatar and at least 1 rat. The flexes being the audio amplifier, it's not required. The Knick-Knack Shacks are not required. Javius is great for tutoring specific minions. It's a deck where we need minions. When we need them, we really need them, and the Dark Gifts can be benefits. Like imagine getting double Battle Cry on Grandmaster Romath. Gross. Again, more flex, but this gives you an idea of what a hostage mage list would look like. That looks pretty reasonable. NHL also likes the objections, and he runs Mezzadune with Sleet Skaters. You don't need Mezzadune. If you're not running Mezzadune and you're not doing double objection, you can also run Watercolor Artist, which tutors a Frost Frost card out of your deck. The actual builds for Hostage Mage and how you can do them, and they're all sort of right, is kind of cool. Makes it kind of a cool deck to build. But that's kind of first and foremost, I think, probably the best deck in the format. Coming up in second is a deck that can't really beat it in the open often unless you're kvlt, and that is Maligos Druid. The weird flexi cards in here are the Shattered Reflections, which he runs, but is not necessarily the greatest card. And some people hate the trail mix, but trail mixes are very good. They just require a lot of future planning and knowing exactly when you're going to pop off and how you want to pop off. Shadow Reflections are really good for getting copies of Ysayle, or most often getting copies of A&R, but sometimes you just make copies of Maligos and you blow the person out. Lamau. This deck is very good, but one of its weaknesses is more aggro type decks. Same with Hostage Mage. Hostage Mage isn't always the greatest into hyper fast aggro. So this is a good second deck. This is a good first deck. The third deck becomes interesting because two of the best decks in the format, especially a conquest format, are either Pirate Demon Hunter. This is my list that I hit Legend with this month. Or Questline Demon Hunter. You'll notice my Questline Demon Hunter list that I'm picking is Cyrus's. It's got 1 Consume Magic. It's got Zephyrs the Great. These are obviously flexes. Other places where you can flex is your preference of, do you run 2 Sigils of Time, do you run 2 Glaive Tars, or do you choose to run 2 Glides? This might be a scenario where you decide to cut down on a weapon or possibly a sigil and add a second glide because you're expecting to see lots of hostage mages. Possibly as being, if hostage mage is one of the better decks in a conquest format and is able to ban a bad matchup. This is historically a bad matchup, but this deck is good enough that something like Zephyrs the Great, something like Glides will disrupt them pretty often. You're supposed to pop block and then rip a glide and disrupt the opponent and hope they don't have a way of replacing their block or replacing whatever defensive tools they were using. It's a bad matchup for the Demon Hunter, but cards like this and cards like this do even it out, especially if you expect to see a lot of Hostage Mage. So you're picking one of the two approaches, right? You're either going with the aggro or you're going with the Questline Demon Hunter. Questline Demon Hunter gets extra points when Conquest happens because you can ban some of its bad matchups, and some of its bad matchups have been nerfed anyway. So what then becomes the next interesting decision is what's your fourth deck? What are you bringing? I've seen the first thing thrown around is XL Shadow Priest, which has gone ahead and cut the Void Touched Attendant. If you look and see at more modern lists, we're cutting Attendant. I might cut Twilight Deceptor first, but that's fine. If we want to cut, Sing Along Buddy's 3 mana now. Void Touched is 2 mana. Void Touched looks terrible at 2 mana in XL Shadow Priest. So running stuff instead like Hopeful Dryad, which can give you some interesting results. Maybe a Najak in this slot, especially if we're expecting a lot of Miracle Rogues. Najak would be great into Miracle Rogues. Naren is also a favorite of mine in this 3 mana slot, but this looks like a really clean list from Sinferno. XL Shadow Priest has continued to look fairly strong on statistical websites like HS Replay, whereas 30 Shadow Priest has completely fallen off the map. If you delete the best card in Void Touched Attendant, it has not proved to be able to survive as easily. This is an excellent fourth deck. Another excellent fourth deck is a deck I've featured before. I have cut the Web Weavers from Miracle Rogue for now. I've seen people still play them. I've seen people argue that they're still playable because they are now proccing by Greedy Partner. It could be so. I've lost to Web Weaver lists. I'm cutting Web Weavers for now and returning to a formula that I know works. Corrupting Saladrisil using Trickster. The Saladrisil nerf doesn't do anything to this deck because you're never paying, you're never really prepping this for 5 anyway, unless something terrible has happened. So, Trickster into this being 0, playing a Cutlass or something still corrupts this, and we go from there. This is the list that OTZ brought to West versus East and won the whole thing with it. Now, this is a fine fourth deck, but what do we want to get rid of if we are going to play this as our fourth deck? Well, this might shift our ban away from an aggro deck and more towards if I see a Hostage Mage, maybe I'm banning Hostage Mage because Hostage Mage is pretty much a 1090 matchup. If you're on the Miracle side, you have a really tough time being Hostage Mage because of their infinite stall tools and their ways to gain armor, just freezing your giants with Sleet Skaters over and over and over again. Maybe it's Highlander Shaman. This is an old list of Highlander Shaman that I shared. I ripped off of HS Guru. People were like, but Schmoopy, what about the Highlander Shaman? This seems fine. This packs enough disruption that it probably does okay into Mage. It does well if you're expecting Pirate Demon Hunter. If you're expecting Shadow Priest, you don't have to ban aggro if you bring this pile. This does pretty good in the Priest and pretty good into Pirate DH. Where it's going to struggle is it might not have the right tools to deal with questline DH. If questline DH does their, big stat pop off, it can sort of disrupt the druid deck, but it's a little bit harder. I don't know. I would not bring this, but it might be some pile like this if you expect that you want to try and farm aggro and you think people are going to bring aggro and still have some game into the slower stuff. Another deck I've heard thrown around is some sort of Seedlock. I picked a list off of Neon 31's website that looked strong into aggro. The whole reason why you would bring a Seedlock is it's strong into aggro, and this version, the person admitted, they cut rats from their list because they were not seeing any combo. Their MMR was incredibly high, though. They entered at 3 after going 19-4 for their climb. You'll notice they have, crazy stuff like Unlicensed Apothecary and Cataclysm. Cataclysm makes some sense for going into uncommon Miracle Rogue matchup if you expect people to bring a lot of Miracle Rogues. Unlicensed Apothecary is just like, turbo technology if you want to try and complete the quest quickly. These could very easily be rats, and you'd have a little bit more of a well-rounded list into a conquest setting and feel like you have a little bit of a better chance into a combo deck. Seedlock does typically do better in the hostage mage, going the mass production route. And ramping up your damage fairly early can be very challenging for the hostage mage to deal with, unless they themselves have found a way to loop block enough times and or get into their hostage type scenario. This also crashes aggro, so you could see people bringing a Seedlock, but I don't know if I would. As far as decks that I would bring that I believe in, I don't know if I would bring Mali Druid myself. Somebody asked me what would your lineup be. I'd probably bring Astral Communion. I'd probably bring Hostage Mage. Slightly different Hostage Mage list, one that I'm more comfortable with. I'd probably bring Astral Communion Druid. I find I have a lot of reps with this. The gameplay is fairly stress-free and not all that complicated. The mulligan is fine Astral Communion. If you find Astral Communion, you can usually feel pretty good about your game. If you don't find Astral Communion and you find Guff, you can kind of get to Guff quickly. I've talked about this deck a lot at this point, so I think you understand that I'm fairly comfortable with this, and this is a solid tier 2 deck. So yes, I'm missing out on some of the tier 1 matchups that a Maligos Druid would have, but I would feel more comfortable bringing this, and that I could scam a win playing it. I would consider bringing a Frog Shaman. This is a great anti-aggro deck. The pop-off turns themselves usually lend to being able to play a Crash of Thunder or buff a big board with Volcanic Burst that has Rush or Taunts off of the pop-up books. Multiple Storms, Wraths being discovered and played. Just sort of a strong, Purrs plays this in kind of like an anti-aggro control type deck list. The one thing that you probably want to do is if you are playing this and you would bring this as a spicy take, you probably end up wanting to get rid of, Hostage Mage in the bans. Because I don't know how this deck necessarily beats Ice Block. It probably doesn't. Especially multiple turns, especially a deck that can play Solid Alibi multiple times. Somebody's going to bring Quest Mage. And I think if you can ban a hyper aggro or really, teched up list, this deck is a fantastic deck to bring to the tournament. Because it is it's really strong into slower stuff, and it just, it doesn't like seeing aggro. All right, so those are some examples of what the thinking behind developing a lineup in the Conquest format right now. If you are looking to try and win $100 or 100 packs, as of this video is probably going to pop out on 8 a.m. my time, East Coast time. Lineups for the Wild Open, hosted by Maxie and kvlt. Entries and lineups are due Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone. So make sure if you want to sign up The description will be in the link, along with the Reddit article and the links to the 2 streams that will be simultaneously casting it if you want to just watch or whatever. Any info that you want on the competition itself, check out the description. It wouldn't shock me if we end up with a little bit more info anyway. All right? And if you enjoy this content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing on my YouTube